Hello, my name is Joe Sam Robinson, and it's my pleasure to have with us once again tonight the famous savant and friend, Dr. Buck Melton. Welcome once again, Buck.
Greetings.
We often get discussing the future. We've mentioned Hollywood, we've mentioned Washington. Maybe we could mention skin diving, going in the water. Is that any? I was thinking
scuba,
about Buster Crabbe.
Not
Is that
Buster Crabbe just recently passed away?
Oh, did he?
A few days ago.
Right, so. Buster. Well, I don't know. So that might be a method to have a rather interesting next decade or two. But I'll let that pass. I know you have stories about it that at some point you could share. You had an encounter with a rapacious shark, and it's another story. But
we'll swum with several sharks.
We'll move past that. It might be a good subject. Well, we've had in our last show, so to speak, we discussed immigration. We went into just to summarize. Well, more or less, this is the situation we have. Is it good? Is it bad? That's just the deal. That's what we have here, and we reflected on the interest of each political party in allowing the situation to be there. And so if I can recollect what I said, I thought the Democrats were, this would help their ultimate policy maneuvers. And you countered effectively, as you often do, saying, well, the Republicans, many of the Danny Warbucks in the party that owned different kinds of chicken emporiums, seize these poor people, illegal immigrants, and then make use of them for their own selfish interests. And so, okay, sin is on both sides of the counter. Now, maybe we can continue our conversation by talking about what's going on with the world order, and is the illegal immigration going on the border? Is that a sign of something else in our fragile world that might be happening? And I think we've discussed the general circumstances of the world where we have a tremendous population increase. The population is at 8 billion. And of those numbers, the people that are in nation states where you could say there's a substantial amount of prosperity, security, it would be a great place to live, and relatively restricted part of the world, maybe 10% of the inhabitants of the world live there. In those countries, the population advance is slow, or indeed a negative population. So the population of the indigenous inhabitants of these wealthy countries is diminishing. And there are reasons for that. One of the most substantial ones is the presence of birth control. And then one also must say abortions and terminated pregnancies. And then the third thing one can say is there's been some substantial change in gender roles over the years. And many people say, well, ladies, if I can use that word, well, I want, besides everything else, I want to be able to have a career and participate in the world and write books or sell hamburgers or drive buses or whatever. That appeals to me to do that, and thus we'll take steps in that direction. And additionally, the economic arrangements that have happened in these developed countries require a two-family income. So if you have a traditional family and have 5 kids, I'm one of the oldest of 5 children, a traditional family. It's very solitary income can't really make that arrangement too possible. So for all those reasons, the population they need new people there. Or do they, so to say that? What is an optimal population? It certainly, as these populations diminish, it causes some economic dislocations. It could say, well, a good example might be Japan, where the life expectancy is quite long, and their general health of the population is quite good, and the reproductive rate is quite small, and they want to stay in indigenous country. People don't come in. The population is diminishing. And so many people are having, that's not good. You have I don't know, whatever you have a hamburger shop, and there are not enough people to buy hamburgers, and so you want more people. Many people would like a population expansion. But finally, getting into this story is that as the population increases tremendously, an enormous increase in population, inevitably the resources of the planet are challenged by supporting all of these people. So this huge population is out there, which no one is particularly paying any attention to, I could say that. And other than when the population there tries to enter as we discussed last time on our southwestern border, what this really means, the bigger picture, is this enormous unrestrained population increase in third world countries where there's still eight children there. And formerly, this would be a normal set of human circumstances. You be fertile and reproduce is that right? I'm quoting the Bible here.
Be fruitful and multiply.
You got that.
Yes.
Can you name the book?
Genesis, the very first chapter, I believe.
That's that Southern Baptist background book, I think. Kudos to, what are they called? The royal something, like the MYF, you had the royal ambassadors.
If you say
slightly
so.
off subject.
If you say so, yeah.
I
have heard of it.
Right. Okay. Well, in any
Yeah.
event, you did well with that.
Well, let me jump in here. If I can.
But no, you keep going.
Yeah, you've unpacked a lot of things here. So
go ahead.
A lot of it stems from geography, and I think that American schools have done generally a very bad job in the last century of geography because it seems too deterministic for a lot of modern social scientists. They don't like the idea that your existence, your future, your opportunities may be determined by something beyond your control. But the temperate areas of Earth have always had a tremendous advantage, and it means that the climate is fairly healthy. If you look at the tropics, you have disease, you have Ebola, you have HIV, you've got plague coming out of it. In the far north, you can't eke out a living. There's not enough protein up there. There's not enough sunlight for good growing seasons. So it's the temperate areas of the world that have a tremendous advantage. And then they can leverage this, I think, into a moderate population growth, moderate growth of labor, excess labor, which they can put into education, which they can then leverage into modern technology, which allows them to essentially colonize the rest of the world. And so that makes them a draw. So the United States is in a temperate zone, Europe is in a temperate zone.
You think so in Macon, or I'll just let you pass?
I'll put it this way. As a Macon born and bred, I thought I could handle heat until I started traveling in the tropics. I see. And so this means a lot of people in the equatorial zones want to move to the temperate zones. At the same time, the temperate zones hit the Industrial Revolution first, and with the Industrial Revolution and the rise of technocracy, children become an economic liability for a much longer period until they are old enough to have gotten more specialized education. And so this leads, along with birth control, which is invented by these modern technological societies, this leads to a disincentive to have large families. While all this is happening, Western medicine and Western science managed to bring down infant mortality on a worldwide basis, once again, more so in the temperate zones and in the industrialized regions than elsewhere. But these things filter down into the tropics, into Africa, into East Asia, where children are still an economic asset at an early age, which gives them an incentive to keep on having huge families. And infant mortality is declining, so you see the population spinning out of control in these regions, and we get this this unbearable population boom. I will say it's not that nobody's paying attention. There are groups out there, but they're, once again, let me bring in the Bible again, voices crying in the wilderness. The zero population growth movement, the anti-natalist movement, the vegan movement. We could solve world hunger if everybody went vegan, but our primitive Neanderthal caveman brains want our raw meat, and so all of these movements are seen as the lunatic fringe. They're seen as unbiblical. They're seen as unmanly, and they are ridiculed and laughed at. And so, by and large, you are right. The lemmings just keep marching straight to the sea. And at some point, we're going to get a tipping point, and we won't be able to save it.
Well, we could keep discussing this a little bit, and it's fair enough that people are at least aware of this. But one of the disadvantages of nation states is that they often restrict the preponderant amount of their interest to the people within their borders. Because the people in the borders rarely can get too excited about sending if a little something happens elsewhere where a small child is saved and they put the child on television and say, well, the American taxpayer saved this child. Well, great. On the other hand, any sort of really substantial worldview is a very difficult one for politicians to accept, and sort of going back to the southwestern border, which we sort of touched on, not to our mutual satisfaction. I think we each had points to make on this, but all right. So this tremendous population is really in a terrible set of circumstances, and getting anywhere where they can have a better life is worth any sacrifice. And I think we see that in people trying to cross from sub-Saharan Africa into Western Europe, and they die in the Mediterranean. This is a big problem, though the number of people coming into Western Europe is minuscule compared to the U.S. situation, or the number of people coming into Japan or Singapore. So or we could say Canada, although the Canadians need people. Just to go through this arrangement, so we have these 7 billion people out there that are trying to cross wherever they can cross. And for many reasons, the U.S. is a number one attractive place. And I think we sort of got into that as to the national psyche, American exceptionalism. We're going to, I think you mentioned, well, blood doesn't count here, whatever that means, common ancestry. And whereas in many countries it does, I might say, Switzerland. This is a great country. It's prosperous, and on it stays aloof. It has its deal there, and it's difficult to ever get a Swiss passport. I imagine it's possible, but certainly illegal immigrants can't easily find a home there. And I'm sure it's a pretty nice, very nice place to live. Actually, it's nice.
But once again, it's got geography working for it. I mean, the Alps.
Right. Well, we have the situation. What is and so I'm making the point: the illegal immigration into the country is powered by a lot of things. We discussed self-interest. Seemingly, this policy. Point number one is there are thousands and millions of people that would like to escape. The border is open, so there's no limit. There is no limit to the number of people that might try and cross, and so at some point, some kind of policy is going to have to be put in there. Another issue that we sort of almost lightly touched on is some of the we discussed the economics that some people in the U.S. might take advantage of this flood of illegal immigrants, which they certainly do. And in some ways, at least in a sub-rosa fashion, encourage this immigration. So millions, all right, great, we're going to have people to work in the chicken processing plant, and I'll pay them less money, and I'll make more money. But one of the things going on is the economic impact of this particular arrangement, and it's not commonly discussed. But one of the big things that goes on is the money that is sent back to their families overseas. And I've rarely seen this commented upon, but that's really just an enormous flow of funds out of the United States into other places, other villages, small towns. And one sort of personal story is some years ago, I was at a little symposium sponsored by the Aspen Institute, and one person there was the ambassador from Guatemala who said, and I think the correct story is, the country, I don't know what Guatemalans are listening to, but it's a statement, I think it's true. The country depends on the money that's coming in when people send it back to their families. And that's what keeps the place going. The GNP of the country is just totally dependent on that. It's just keeping everything afloat here in Guatemala. If you go to a small village there, a country village, the biggest house there is that people don't work. They've got someone that can send $100 a month back from their job in San Diego, and his whole family is just the king of the village. And that's one of the things going on. Were the money to stay in the States, presumably it would have a multiplier effect, and it would actually make the country somewhat more prosperous. Yes. But I'll move past. Well, you have a comment.
Yeah, well, a couple things. I don't know, and maybe you know, but to compare the figures of the money that is being sent by illegal immigrants or even legal immigrants back to Central America. How much does that compare to the amount of money that we are losing by outsourcing all of our production to China? Or for that matter, if you want to look at the Marshall Plan. The point I'm trying to make is that perhaps this money, and I don't know the figures, but perhaps this money is not all that much in the great scheme of things, and it might be being used to help build up infrastructure in Central America that in time will alleviate bad conditions there. Create a stronger middle class, which would bring about more stable legal and social conditions. So, I'm worried about illegal immigration because of the lack of socialization. And once again, I'm not dumping on immigrants. We are a nation of immigrants. A lot of these people coming up from Central America are the real Americans in the sense that they are working hard to better themselves. But as a whole, I'm worried about the cultural impact. But this is one part of it that I don't necessarily worry about as much, because maybe that can be seen as seed money, but that in the end will improve conditions to the point down there that will make this immigration less of a problem.
Well, I mean, so we get into some complicated issues here on the world order. So that the story is tossed around. What is the world order? And so we have Adams, and the idea of comparative advantage. So we're going to send it would be better for the U.S. to let's say go to Guatemala and put a plant that can manufacture whatever it manufactures. Because the supply of labor is so inexpensive, and thus there's an economic reason to do that. And indeed, that's what happened in China. Or one can say, well, remember this, after World War II, Japan was getting back on its feet, and toys were coming in from Japan, and the idea, well, look at the Japanese, you have a small little truck made in Japan on the bottom of it.
The Tonka.
People would
the
say,
Tonka toy.
But the money that came into there turned things around, and so that is an important thing that you brought up to consider in this world situation. There are some comparative advantages, there are economic issues, and putting money in other places. And indeed, I think if you look at both Japan and China, the arrangements that took place for the selfish economic reasons. Probably some Republicans were involved in this, but they were putting plants in China or in Japan, and they could say, look at this labor force here. I mean, this exceeds anything that the diligence of the people that came into work. They would work like, 100 hours a week. They live in barracks. They're precise. They're happy to have the job. They go, and the amount of the expense of using this labor force is nothing can compare with the U.S. It's just so much better. So the comparative advantage that goes on there is an example of whatever, and that it was discussed in the 18th century, whatever, the early economists, and so presumably each country should be better. So the Chinese should get a lot of benefits from this, and we would get cheaper goods. And indeed, if you look at the American economic system, and you could say, look, the government is spending money like crazy. We have this deficit. Why isn't inflation going crazy? Why aren't we having terrible inflation here? Why? And the reason, a major reason, is the country was able to bring these very inexpensive imports in, and that made things a lot better.
Yeah, but in the long term, that means that the Americans can't find jobs, and you've got to balance that against this constant outflow of money. The problem with Smith, and Smith is not writing from a nationalist point of view. I mean, he's writing about the laws of economics as if they are equivalent to the hard sciences, but there might be another consideration as well. A lot of times you talk about globalization and the evils of the nation state as if we can make a rational choice between, well, should we have nation states or should we have globalization? But the fact is, the Neanderthal brain is geared to tribalism, which is just another word for nationalism. It's an us-them mentality. So you can tout the benefits of globalization and the global economy all you want to, but as long as there are people out there who are going to see it in terms of us-them, and it's our nation, it's our region, or yes, it's our blood against the darker races or the browner races, you just can't legislate that away.
Well, Buck, I'm happy to see you've been converted to a lot of my opinions. You've surreptitiously sort of tossed one out, which is almost the end game for me in discussing this dilemma, which is we need to understand the limits that our brain is imposing.
Oh, I'm using that all the time in my classes.
Great, I'm happy to hear that.
I've learned a lot of our many conversations in the past 15 years or so, and you can call it different names. You can call it original sin, but the fact is, we are selfish brutes when you get right down to it. And if you've got scarce resources, that selfishness is going to manifest.
So just to go into this subject, or I was sailing the ship a little bit. So yes, what happened in China, what happened in Japan is they had their own their ability to expand their economy, to do this, do that, actually empowered those nations, these economic circumstances, to become rivals in a way, and appropriately so. So okay, well, you've got to. We don't like your culture. We don't like whatever your deal is. The old are not respected enough. Okay, well, that sounds all right with me, but whatever. The different kinds of issues and we're going to wind up just fighting somehow. And this Adam Smith is the dismal science, if I can say that. Whatever the idea that his ideas were touted. Yes, the assumption is that everyone will enjoy the mutual advantage and everything will be okay about it. Well, that particular issue is one of the, in my opinion, one of the evils which of our brain, if you want to say it, with all the prosperity, all the great things that are happening, that the sinister part of empowering anyone, they may bite your foot, and that's generally what happens. And understanding this world circumstance would be a really good thing. And I don't believe that policymakers really do it. And if they do it, they have to do it secretly. So they don't want their political opponents to really understand that. So, for instance, maybe the deal is we're going to do something bad to Guatemala. Then we decided that's in our political or help Guatemala. We're just going to help it. We're going to help Guatemala, yes. And we don't want anyone to know about it.
Well, I would say, even granting the tribalism, it still raises the question of who is my tribe. And we've been sort of proceeding on the assumption, I suppose, that our tribe is the good old US of A. But what if the people in the good old US of A do not see that as their tribe? So for instance, to put my Marxist hat on for a minute, maybe the top 1% of property and wealth owners in America see their tribe as the other members in the top 1%. And those Americans who happen to live in the same country with them who are not in the top 1%, the proletariats or whoever, they can be dispensed with. As long as I can live in my gated community and die in bed, then yes, let's outsource all the jobs because it swells my bank account. Or the Democrats who lust after political power, yes, let's commodify the vote. Since we can't change the mind of the electorate, let's change the electorate by revising the immigration laws as Teddy Kennedy did in 1965. So I guess what I come down to is maybe nationalism would work if we could see the American nation as a whole as having some sort of common interest. I don't see either party as having done that, perhaps paid lip service to it, but I don't see them as having done that for a very long time. And interestingly enough, the people who have been most left out on the cold is the average blue-collar American worker, most of whom, even to this point, are still descended from Western Europeans and perhaps Africans. So that's an interesting thought.
Well, yes, and I'll just say on this point, the way that the brain functions and the in-group and the out-group, the people that are us and the people that are them. You've seen one tremendous example of that is the movie The 4th of July, I think if I got it right. These rather, I don't know, spider-like creatures invade.
Independence Day.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah,
okay.
So,
These spider-like creatures blowing places up and whatever. And there's this tremendous sense of these spiders are not us, and we're all together here. And so it unites the world in a curious way. Maybe not exactly a good analogy. The coronavirus might have done that a little. I mean, not totally, but the world is facing this crisis together.
I don't see that, at least in America, the tremendous pushback that this is a Democratic plot, that these vaccines will introduce nanites into us and control our thinking. And the thing that I've found the most amazing is that the Republicans who tend to be sort of the conservative, white, traditional Western European, Bible-thumping, meat-eating, grain-fed Americans, gun-owning Americans, suddenly, I can't wear a mask. I have trouble breathing with it. So it's all a political voice.
Okay, it would be better for world solidarity if these spider people invaded. But okay, I'll take your point. Well,
yes.
I want to make, as we're getting near the end of our conversation, you mentioned the 1%, et cetera. And I think in some ways, the 800-pound gorilla in this world order is the notion of property. So it's kind of a shorthand for mammalian dominance, a little bit. And what will property do for you? And so people are controlled by the lust for property. It's a great way to control people. If you're in a capitalist society, we're just going to work like crazy, and it's inevitable that the humans will want to be the big dog. And the way they see, not totally, but a substantial number of people can understand it.
I'm a little more charitable than that. That I think the thing that drives us to the really rich to accumulate excessive wealth, not even comfortable wealth, but excessive wealth, is the same thing that drives people to get fat. You never know when you're going to eat again. It's the caveman mentality.
I think that's a good point, isn't it? So how much? What's the Russian? What's the Russian? I don't know. Short story about how much land do you need? Who was that? Who was the story? Somebody was in South Russia. They came in from Moscow, and you can have as much land as you can obtain. If you run around the steps here, and you plant little posters here, and you can get back here by sundown. All the land that you can do this will be yours. And so you could say, well, I just need a couple acres and I'll be back. No, in this particular story, the person ran around and the sun is coming down. He finally got back in time, and so he accumulated this tremendous parsimony there. And then he dropped dead, and so okay, now he's dead, and then he was buried in 6 feet of land. And the point of the story was, how much land does a person need? And so indeed, the wealth that's out there, in my opinion, is after you get enough to eat and you're going to wear shoes, pretty much. I mean, you get your health taken care of. It's pretty much what you need, and everything after that is part of this desire for dominance. It's a hardwired thing, and people will do anything to, in a way, be able to say, I'm the big dog, and by whatever standard they have. And there are other cultures that do the same. Maybe you've won the Nobel Prize, maybe you've got 27, whatever the deal is. People compete with one another. And it's such an easy way to do it, was to use property. Well, what I'm sort of getting into near the end of our conversation is in the middle of our thinking about the world order, is the notion of what does property, ergo wealth, mean. And this can be a useful way to control people, I think. If you say, well, you're going to work another 10 hours, we can do something. And traditionally, that's stabilized society, but with, and we haven't gotten too much into this, there's not enough time to do it, but AI is out there, and so presumably, all of the control mechanism that property causes might be go away in a lot of ways. And indeed, the idea that you get up and you work for 8 hours, it might be unnecessary to do that, and you're just going to sit there and look at the wall. I don't need to do this. I've got whatever. What is going to be the impact on our 8 billion fellow inhabitants here if something like that happens? Now, we're near the end here, and I know this is a favorite subject of yours, so maybe you can opine on that in our last bit of time.
Well, very, very quickly, I know that you have posited in your book that maybe AI can come up with with the perfect algorithm that can solve all the problems. I've got 3 critiques of that. Number one, what will the values of the AI be? Will it really make the right decisions? Number 2, even if it does, will those decisions be accepted as right by all rational actors? And thirdly, will all actors be rational? And I have severe doubts on all 3 levels.
Well, good. I'll just hit the tennis ball back once with the AI. Well, my views are complicated. But one of the issues that goes on is the encoding. So, all right, you have this enormous machine here, and it's really, it'll just, you feed something to it, it's going to come, it'll understand causality, it'll come back with whatever, the most superior plan that's possible. But a lot depends on the interface with the information that goes into it. So for instance, I would say if you're in healthcare, there's a tremendous paper out there about how well AI can do replacing doctors. So you call up on the phone, hi there, hey, you've reached, Bob, I'm an AI person, well, my feet hurt. And Bob says, oh, well, what's the deal? Do they hurt when you raise them up or put them down, or how much did you walk? And then so some decision comes out. But right now, presently, the tone of, although it maybe could happen, the tone of voice is not there. The facial expressions are not there. And so the perfection of the information, the encoding coming in, is not perfect, even though the algorithm might be, and indeed the algorithm might not be, because the complexities of understanding causality are very difficult. And I think we've talked about quantum mechanics and other deals that may limit our abilities to reduplicate God, so to speak. We in the bottom line here is that the Newtonian physics work for our place in the ocean, but 1,000 feet down, there's another set of realities that might influence our part of the ocean. So, I mean, I have those issues about how ultimately successful AI could be in the longest run of it, and would be concerned that the same thing, if you think the virus broke out in Wuhan, which I have a substantial chance that it did, that it was the source's apprentice. So somebody is going to use AI and to say, this is how to handle the Chinese. We're going to move or the Chinese might use, this is the way we're going to put our fleet, or what we're going to do here and going to do there. And there can be some fundamental errors in the confidence that at least initially is placed in it. So if we went 1,000 years just waiting for this to perfect itself, well, maybe it would be better and better. But if you're going it very quickly, things might not work. And many examples of humans attempting to understand rationality and the mistakes they made, Guns of August kind of story, all these catastrophes. Okay, and at that point, I will let you close.
Well, I will get you some reading material on dystopian fiction and cybernetic revolt, and I hope it will keep you up at night, because I think we're rapidly approaching that kind of world in the next 10, 20, or 30 years.
And I won't go too far into this discussion, but actually often fiction and imagining possibilities is a really useful way to assess future events.
Indeed.
Okay. On that note, well, thanks once again for being here, Buck. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves. Endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.